Aloha! Thank you for joining us for a presentation, Little Fire Ants in Hawaii. This Ho'ike presentation is brought to you by the Oahu Invasive Species Committee. My name is Miss Jamie, and my favorite animal is the Kamehameha butterfly. That's the butterfly that's pictured in the frame here. Throughout this presentation, you'll see this butterfly, and at the end, if you can tell us how many butterflies you found, you'll be entered to win a prize from OISC. So the topics we're going to cover today are native species, invasive species, ants in Hawaii, more particularly little fire ants, and how you can help fight this invasive species, the little fire ant. First, I want to talk about what makes Hawaii so unique when it comes to biodiversity, or why we have so many different types of plants and animals found here. Hawaii is the most isolated island chain on the planet. You can see here that we are so far away from any other landmass. 70 million years ago, Hawaii was born from volcanic hotspots in the middle of the ocean. And over these 70 million years, new species arrived here on our islands, but because of how far away it is, it took a really long for those species to get here. It also took a really long time for humans to get here. But when they did arrive, the first humans were the Polynesian voyagers. And when they arrived here, there were lush forests and oceans teeming with wildlife, and even some plants and animals that we still see here today. Things like the koa beetle or the koa butterfly, or even this happy-faced spider. What's interesting is if you look at the koa beetle and the koa butterfly, they have similar coloration, and that's because they live on the same plant, the koa tree, which is also native to Hawaii. In addition to all of these insects, we had a lot of birds in our forests, birds that we still see today. So what are native species? Go ahead and think. Is it plants and animals that arrived without the help of humans, or plants and animals that arrived with the help of humans? If you said without, you're correct. Native species are plants and animals that arrived without the help of humans. If native species got here on their own, well, how did they get here? They got here by one of the 3 W's. In Hawaii, we also say the 3 M's. We have wind, or makani, waves, or moana, wing, or manu. So things can get blown around, let's say in a hurricane or maybe a tropical storm. Things can wind up here from the ocean, right? From waves. They can wash up on shore after floating around for a long time on the ocean. And then maybe something might even blow it around once it washes up on shore. But most of the plants and animals arrived here by wing, from birds. Birds love to eat fruit, and when they eat fruit, they end up swallowing a lot of seeds. Those seeds get excreted somewhere else, and that's how a lot of plants move around. Now, one of the cool things about Hawaiian species is that they were here for so long and not a lot of stuff made it over here, that they started to adapt to their new surroundings. So if one bird arrived 60 million years ago and he found that there were new plants and animals here, plants that he wasn't quite used to, over a long period of time, what will happen is called adaptive radiation. This is where a single species will adapt so much to their new environment, they actually become a whole new species. And that's why we have so many animals found only in Hawaii and nowhere else in the world. Because they created all of these new adaptations, and they were so significant. Through the adaptation process, many species also lost their defenses since they didn't need them. This leaves them a little bit vulnerable, especially when new species arrive here. Did you know that the only endemic native Hawaiian mammals are the Opeapea, which is the Hawaiian hoary bat, and Ilioholoikauaua, the Hawaiian monk seal. These are the only two native mammals. So that means that all these other animals like cats, dogs, goats, and guinea pigs, they were all brought here by people. When we talk about native species, they can be either two things, endemic or indigenous. Endemic means that they're found nowhere else in the world, just like the ohia tree here. The ohia tree is super important to our Hawaiian forest and actually makes up 80% of the trees in our Hawaiian forest. But it's endemic, which means it's found nowhere else in the world. It evolved here in Hawaii. Native species can also be indigenous. That means they naturally occur in more than one place. Like this Alima pictured here is found in Hawaii, but also all the way up the Hawaiian Island chain up till China. So it's native to more than one place. Alima is also our island flower in Oahu, and it's actually pretty tasty too. So what are non-native species? Well, these are plants and animals that arrived with the help of humans. Sometimes that happened on purpose because someone brought it with them because they know they could use the plant for food or medicine, or they brought animals for livestock or pets. And sometimes it was simply that they had that plant back home and they wanted to bring it to their new home. But many plants and animals, especially these days, are brought here by accident as stowaways. Nobody brought cockroaches or mosquitoes here on purpose, that's for sure. So, are all non-native species invasive? Well, how do you feel about the things pictured here? I don't have any bad thoughts about them, and these are all non-native species. That's because these things don't cause any problems, right? I don't have bad thoughts because they're beneficial. Maybe they taste good or smell good and look pretty. You can trade them or sell them, and some of them are really culturally important, like taro. So just because something is non-native doesn't mean that it's invasive. Do you recognize any of the species in this room? These are all invasive species here in Hawaii. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a non-native species invasive. Invasive species harm one or more of these four things: our health, our economy, our environment, our quality of life. And it's important to remember that not all invasive species are created equal. Some of these only harm one of these things, but some harm all four, so they're much worse. Let's talk a little bit about the mosquito. That's an invasive species that harms all four. They harm our health because they give us diseases. Some diseases like dengue fever or Zika. So they make us sick and they cause these itchy bumps. They harm our economy or how we make and spend our money. When you're sick, you have to spend money on the doctors, right? And you can't work, so you can't make money. And that's a harm for our economy. They also harm our environment, right? They harm our native species. Mosquitoes are actually the #1 killer of native Hawaiian birds. They change our quality of life as well. When you have to be worried about mosquitoes, you're worried about having to put on bug spray, maybe cover up your arms, and protect yourself from these nasty little bugs. So mosquitoes cause harm to all four of those things. So they are a very bad invasive species. So what's some other ways that invasive species are so good at being bad? Well, they can live in a variety of habitats. Just like the rats here, they can live in cities and eat out of trash cans or dumpsters, but they can also live in the forest. In fact, in many of our pristine native forests, we have to control for rats. Invasive species reproduce quickly, just like the mongoose here. They can produce a ton of babies in their lifetimes. Invasive species also use up all the resources, right? So this is a Myconia. This is one of OISC's target species, and they soak up a lot of the light, creating a lot of shade underneath them with their big leaves. And that doesn't allow for plants underneath them to get the sunshine that they need. So Myconia uses up a resource, sunshine. And invasive species could lack natural enemies, just like the pig here. Pigs don't have to worry about apex predators like mountain lions or wolves or cougars in our native Hawaiian forests, right? They have to worry about humans, and that's just about it. So pigs lack natural enemies in our forests, which gives them a big advantage. Now let's talk about ants. Ants are survivors. They are one of the most perfectly built creatures alive, and they've been around for at least 130 million years. That means they've been surviving since the dinosaurs. They found some ants that were stuck in 96 million years old, and they pretty much look the same as today's ants. That means they're a perfectly evolved creature and are really good at what they do. Do you think that there are any native ant species in Hawaii? No, there aren't, but there are over 65 introduced ant species. These are some common ones that you see in Hawaii. The glabber ant is a common black ant that you often see running around in your kitchen. There's the middle is the crazy ant or yellow crazy ant, and these you often see in the forest. And they're called crazy ants because they seem to be running around in no particular direction, all crazy like. And the last one is the big-headed ant. These you'll see more often in your yards or at the beach park, sunny areas like that. So if you think about it, there's pretty much not a day that goes by that you don't see an ant, because everyone's got ants in their home, yard, and even their school. So what's the big deal about little fire ants? Well, a lot of people, when they think of fire ants, they think of the tropical fire ant. This is a common one here in Hawaii and has been widely established since about the 1800s. This is the ant that most people get stung by at the beach or that you see at the park. You'll often see them in really sunny, dry areas like parking lots and fields, and they build these mounds that have distinct openings. And they're pretty large compared to little fire ants, about 4 times the size. Little fire ants, on the other hand, are very small and difficult to see. They live in a different kind of habitat. They actually like it where it's shady and damp. They don't want to live in the dry, hot sun. They want to live in areas like a rainforest or nice shady spots in our yard. And they don't build mounds. They can nest just about anywhere that's shady and moist. Now, ants have lived for millions of years, and they're what we call a social insect. Social insects live in complex colonies where each ant has a role, and these colonies are ruled by a queen. Most of the ants all work for her, and they exist for one goal: to protect and support her so she can make more ants. So the more they feed her, the more eggs she can lay, and the more ants there are, and eventually the colony gets too packed and they need to spread out. So what the queen will do is she'll lay really special eggs that are called daughter queens, and these are exact genetic copies. Once born, the daughter queens will gather up some worker ants and throw them on their back and go walk a little ways and start up their own colony. So what happens is when these colonies meet each other, they actually recognize one another. So if you have a house with an infestation here, and then it grows to here, and it goes on and on, what happens is eventually you have a super colony. And instead of fighting one another, they work together to support one another. and help each other out. Little fire ants don't move very far on their own, so what are they moving around on? They move around on plants or cut flowers and tea leaves, fruit and produce, or other cars and tools when humans move them around. Your help is needed to stop little fire ants. We need you to survey your yard or the areas where you play once a year and collect the samples so we can look at ants underneath a microscope. There are a couple different types of ants out there that look like little fire ants, so just seeing them in a picture won't do. You have to get up close and personal under a microscope to confirm that it's really little fire ants. And never underestimate the power of student data. Since 2014, students have provided over 2,600 samples from all over Oahu. And that's compared to about 1,000 samples that received from the public. So the student samples really do make up a good portion of the samples that we receive. Next, we're going to watch a video that's going to show you how to survey your yard for little fire ants. Enjoy. Did you know that there are over 60 different ant species in Hawaii and none of them are native? And the meanest, most terrible of them all is the little fire ant. You never know what corner they could be hiding around, so we need your help to look for them. Let's find them before they find you. In order to look for little fire ants, you'll need a few things that you might already have at home. First thing is peanut butter. If you're allergic to peanut butter, don't use things like honey or Nutella. Instead, you can use Spam or mayonnaise. Next, you'll need chopsticks. Break these in half or double the sticks. A zip-top bag for putting your ants in, and a stamped envelope to mail your ants in for identification. Once you have all your supplies, dip your sticks in the peanut butter. You only need a very thin smear, so wipe away the excess at the top of the jar. Repeat this process with all your sticks. Little fire ants like damp, shady areas. Place the sticks at the base of plants and other shady, moist spots. Be sure to avoid direct sunlight. Here's Miss Jamie laying out some sticks. Now, the next thing to do is sit back and relax for about 45 minutes to an hour, which is when you'll go and pick up your sticks. When you pick up your sticks, place them carefully in the plastic zip-top bag, then seal it. Now you can take a look and see what kind of ants you have. Next, you're going to put your ants in the freezer overnight. You don't want live ants when you mail them. The next day, take your ants out of the freezer. With your sample, be sure to include your name, address, and phone number so we can contact you. You're going to mail them to either the Hawaii Department of Agriculture or to your local invasive species committee. Once your sample is in the mail, your work is done. Mahalo for helping us chase away the problem of little fire ants. Now you're ready to look for little fire ants. Don't forget, you can use generic peanut butter. LFA actually prefer cheap peanut butter, and if you're allergic, you can use Spam or mayonnaise. Don't use Nutella, almond butter, or honey. Don't leave your stick out for too long. 45 minutes to an hour is great. Any longer than that, and the ants could take the bait and run. And if you don't have a yard, don't forget, you can always survey a nearby park or garden or somewhere at your school. Thank you so much for learning with us today. I'll go ahead and include this link that's pictured here below so that you can submit your butterfly guesses to be entered in a contest to win some OISC swag. And also you can reach out to us for questions or comments via oisced@hawaii.edu. Mahalo.